Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. This will be our fourth episode. His name is Ken Silva, Silva. He's just published an excellent book. I can't recommend it enough. Please go get this book. It's an important historical book with 350 footnotes that details something very murky as these assassination plots against Trump that led up to his victory. I guess it was late 2024, but some of the stuff wasn't out, and I learned some stuff reading through the book. I also heard him on two really big shows. He did a great interview with Tucker Carlson. We had scheduled this 2 weeks ago, and when it dropped, it was the same day as our interview. I was like, well, maybe we should just reschedule. So I'm glad to have him be flexible and come back a couple weeks later. But those are also really good interviews. So we'll kind of cover some of that information, but I have some other questions that maybe weren't covered by Mario Knopfel and Tucker Carlson. But the full title of the book, if you're watching this on my six channels, is The Trump Assassination Plots: What the Investigations Missed and Why It Matters. And it's available now. I know it's on Amazon, published in May 2026. But like I said, this will be our fourth episode. We also did one right after the assassination attempts. And that took place on August 6th, 2024. And so that one was titled Attempted Trump Assassination. So I think that was even before the Ruth one, which I think it was. But before that, we had done one with Becca, who's mentioned in this book. We covered the Order of Nine Ankles because Ken writes on a wide variety of different subjects on Headline USA. And he came to my attention because I'd written a book about the same subject, which is in this book too, and it's still relevant. And it may not be one of the most remembered assassination attempts, but for people who've listened to my show, we've covered Nikita Kasap, and we can talk more about that in this discussion. Who also allegedly was supposed to be involved in another attempt on Trump's life, but there's more to that story. But we also did a Trump assassins in April 2025, so this will be the fourth episode on the same theme. Silva has been a investigative reporter for 15 years. He covers crime, politics, and finance. He's written for the Associated Press, the Economist Intelligence Unit, Reason, and numerous other publications. He's a contributor to the Libertarian Institute and an editor of Headline USA, and he also was published by the Libertarian Institute. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But we have a lot to cover. So, Ken, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's great to be with you. And yeah, first of all, thank you so much for actually reading the book. I mean, it means a lot. I spent almost 2 years pouring my heart and soul into this, but I know it's a big ask to have somebody sit down for 5-6 hours, however long it takes to read this 200+ page book. I'm asking, people to devote a big chunk of their life. So whenever somebody does that, I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah, it's a great work, and like I said, it's a historical piece on this vague subject. And like when you were talking with Carlson, it was like these were events that may led to a personality change in Trump. Like you guys were talking about a BCAD Trump almost after these attempts. So I think they're a really important piece of our current culture and political history. So getting some clarity on a murky subject, I think, is really important. But you were right on the story right from the beginning, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've been a full-time reporter for almost 15 years, but the first 10 years was mostly local news and working overseas. And I didn't start covering national issues in the U.S. until late 2021. So I had missed, Russiagate, January 6th, 2020 election, COVID, all these major stories that defined the first part of the 2020s. So when this happened in 2024, I really wanted to be the lead reporter on it. And yeah, 2 years later, we've got this book out. So I think I've accomplished that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of different things. There was a lot of murkiness. It seems like it was a political thing to like not go into detail about stuff. So there mentioned there is a cover up. And it's just really strange about how little we knew about crooks from the very beginning. And I think Tucker Carlson was one of the people who kind of pushed the ball down the field, so to speak, about crooks with his investigation. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a misconception. Everybody says, oh, the FBI said that Crooks didn't have any online footprint. And not to split hairs, but that's not exactly what Christopher Wray and the Biden administration was putting out. They were saying that Crooks never wasn't communicating with other people, which is something that Carlson debunked in November of 2025 when he released a trove of social media comments from Crooks on YouTube, of all places, where Crooks is talking about, assassinating politicians, committing bombings, other acts of terrorism. And in fact, he was interacting with somebody with the handle of Willie Tepes, who turned out to be a Norwegian neo-Nazi who's in an organization that's on the State Department terror watch list. So, this tells you a couple of things. Crooks had to have been flagged to law enforcement in some capacity. And it also gives you a little insight into probably his online persona, where, like other people that you've covered, probably into these dark and murky chat rooms that are devoted to school shootings, mass shootings, gore, other things like that. These chat rooms are constantly inhabited by undercover informants and provocateurs. So, the thing is, this is from 2019, 2020. Crooks is 16, 17 years old. It's 4 years before the shooting. So the significance is a little unclear, but it's the best information we have about like who he probably was and what he was probably getting into online.
That information was not exposed. He was always kind of a mystery, right? I mean, from how did he get in there? There were a lot of videos taken around that time that show him walking around Butler and acting strange. Like it's really something else how little was disclosed right from the beginning about this mysterious guy. There was also a story back then. I think I talked to you about it that his phone pinged in DC, or somebody who was on his phone pinged in DC. Do you remember that story? Like somebody who was close to the FBI offices?
Yeah, that was the Heritage Foundation's oversight project, bought a trove of advertisement data from a data broker that included information on Crooks, his geolocation at certain points, devices connected to Crooks. And it showed that a device traveled to his house and also to DC within a couple hundred yards of an FBI building. Again, the significance of this is unclear because if you're in DC, you're probably within a half mile or so of a 3-letter agency of some sort. So it would be nice. Presumably, the Heritage Foundation knows who actually owns this device. If they have an identifier, it's not too hard to figure out. It would be nice if they revealed this. But it's just another one of those unanswered questions that we have. Considering, how the lack of transparency from the FBI.
And there wasn't just one person, like the Trump, like your view is like online, it's like this is staged fake, but your view, Trump was hit with something, and there were other, like you have a guy who was literally hit by a bullet. Jim Copenhaver wrote your intro, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and I guess we should probably get into that, the whole notion that he staged this attempt. I'm 99.9% positive that this was an authentic attempt on Trump's life. I'd be awfully embarrassed if it turns out that that's not the case, considering I wrote a whole book on it. But, chapter 1 is kind of an action scene from 8 a.m. through the shooting into midnight that night, where they searched the shooter's home. And it really shows you that the local cops were legitimately chasing this kid, and despite a total lack of support from the Secret Service, if a couple different decisions were made, they probably would have caught him, and this would have been a non-event from the start. I've yet to really encounter a coherent theory about how Trump could have staged this himself. Most people point to the lack of the scarring on the ear, but if the bullet just grazes the skin without cutting through the cartilage, it's going to produce a lot of blood without leaving really much of a permanent scar. So, granted, it is like the luckiest place to get shot, but it is plausible that he was shot there. You've got New York Times Pulitzer winning photo shows the second shot whizzing right over his ear. Corey Comparatori was shot and killed. As you said, Jim Copenhaver, David Dutch, both nearly killed, permanently wounded. And then you've got to ask yourself, if the mainstream media and the Biden FBI and the Biden Secret Service, this is some sort of conspiracy where they're also complicit, then why would they turn around and memory hole this event after a week? If you've got, the conspiracy is like the photographers were being told where to go. If these Associated Press, New York Times, Washington Post photographers are in on it, then why would these same institutions stop covering it after just a couple days? It's just really illogical. And perhaps the favorite piece of evidence that I uncovered during my investigation is the fact that after Trump was grazed in the ear, he's ushered off the stage, and in the chaos, his own personal physician was left behind, and he's taken to the Butler Hospital, and the local doctors actually examined him. And in fact, they had to take one of the local doctors on Trump Force One to the next stop in New Jersey because his own physician was left behind. So I would think that, if this were something where it was totally fake, he would have kept his physician right on hand. They would have gone to the hospital. They wouldn't have let the local doctors examine it, but that's not the case. It seems totally unplanned.
Yeah, and it's just very odd. And the iconography of Trump from that event, the fight, fight, fight pose, is like become kind of almost his symbolic calling card. Like it's in his like statues now, the one that's at Doral in Florida. And so it's just like a really incredible event. I think a seminal event for him for sure. But there were other things. I mean, what's your take? Like, there's been another analyst. You've had John Cullen, I think, mentioned in your book. What's your take on maybe other people involved other than crooks?
I think other people were involved. As far as the two-shooter theory, I'm a little bit skeptical on that. First of all, we can totally rule out the water tower, which, if people remember, was the original two-shooter theory, including Cullen propagated that. The thing about the water tower is it's actually a lot closer than it looks if you're just watching the event on YouTube or on TV. I went to the site several times. The water tower is on the same parcel of land. It's actually right there. So it would have been very easy for somebody to spot another shooter on the water tower. Moreover, I don't know how the person would have been able to escape, because there's a residential neighborhood right there. And again, it's on the same parcel of land. It's very, very close. And finally, the angles don't match up, the trajectory. If you're on the water tower, you're practically shooting straight down, and that's not where, that doesn't match the bullet trajectories. However, with all that said, there's peculiar testimony from two of the Secret Service snipers who were on the barn behind Trump, not the ones that eventually shot Crooks, but the set closer to the AGR building. They couldn't see Crooks because the trees were obstructing their views, but they swear they took fire. One of the agents told Congress that, the bullets were so close that I could have reached up my hand and been hit. He swears a bullet winged right by his ear, which almost certainly couldn't have been from Crooks. So the theory is that maybe somebody took a pot shot at them through the trees. Again, though, this doesn't make any sense, because say somebody is shooting at the snipers through the trees to give Crooks more time. Well, they were shooting at the wrong snipers. Those snipers didn't have a view of Crooks anyways. So I think it's more likely that the sniper maybe heard something over a speaker close to him or something like that. But I'm still open to the possibility. I haven't seen any good evidence of two-shooter that theory.
But you mentioned the shots. I mean, even the shots themselves were curious and the timing and everything. And who actually shot Crooks? Can you talk about that?
Well, this is the biggest scandal in my mind is that so Crooks or the guy on the rooftop. I know some people don't think it was Crooks. We can get into that later too. But so the shooter fires 8 shots. The first one wings Trump's ear, uh, shoots 2 more well measured shots, and then 5 rapid fire shots. After those 8 shots, it was actually a local cop on the ground who returned fire and immediately disabled Crooks. And then it's an entire another 10 seconds before the Secret Service sniper on the south barn finally puts that last bullet through Crooks's face. So you've got 8 shots, a 9th shot, 10 seconds of dead air, then the final shot. 15 seconds in total before the Secret Service finally responded. That's a really long time. And that might be suspicious enough, but then you have the sniper's own testimony to Congress where initially he tells investigators that, well, the reason I didn't respond for so long is because I didn't even see Crooks until he had stopped firing. He tries to tell the same story to the Senate Homeland Security Committee, but that committee, some staffer had obtained the sniper's own notes where the sniper writes down immediately after the incident that he, quote, saw Crooks crawling with an AR-15 rifle before the shooting. So the staffer asks him, like, well, you're telling us that you didn't see Crooks until Crooks stopped firing, but your own notes say that you saw him crawling into position. So he's, frankly, I got to say, he's lying. Whether that's something really nefarious, like he was told to stand down and let Crooks get off a shot, it could be as simple as him trying to cover his own ass because he's being treated as the hero and he doesn't want to admit that he messed up. And so it could be something as simple as that. But either way, it's a huge scandal because, he's lying to Congress.
Right. And there was a lot of congressional kind of involvement in this case. You went to the site, but other people of note went there. Johnson and was it Higgis or if I forgot his name, the guy from Louisiana. They kind of went to the site to see what actually happened, right?
Yeah, a lot of people went to the site afterwards. Josh Hawley actually showed up, and the FBI wouldn't let him examine. This is like a couple days later. He was prevented from going on the roof to examine the crime scene, and he kind of threw a fit about that. Clay Higgins from Louisiana, right. He probably did the best investigation of all members of Congress. He's the one who early on emphasized the fact that it was a local cop who shot at Crooks first, not the sniper. He did a really good job on that. He was the one that revealed that he showed up to examine Crooks's body, and the body had been released for cremation, like prematurely, which is, a huge scandal in itself. So he did a good job. And then the actual investigation by the task force did a pretty good job accounting for all the security failures that occurred on that day. Of course, the report didn't address Crooks at all. They were totally stonewalled by the FBI, and they allowed the FBI to stonewall them. I mean, this committee had subpoena power, but they just didn't exercise it. They took no for an answer, which I guess that's par for the course for Congress.
That is interesting. So the body of Crooks too. This is a major event. They had him cremated within a week, right? Like super fast. And so there was new information in your book that I hadn't heard of. That during I think an X-ray, there were bullet fragments in his shoulder or something like that, right?
Yep, which goes back to the controversy of the feds say that the local cop who fired at Crooks didn't actually hit Crooks, and it was the sniper that saved the day. But Crooks's body is taken to the Allegheny County medical examiner for an autopsy and a toxicology, and they release it with fragments still in its shoulder. And I've been told by ballistic experts that final shot by the Secret Service sniper, it was a 300 Win Mag round. It goes in Crooks's left lip, out the neck, back into kind of his collarbone, and then it fragments and makes 2 re-exit wounds out his back. And this giant round, they recovered those fragments, and it's these smaller fragments in the shoulder that were probably from the local cops' round. And they destroyed that evidence, and now they're saying the local cop didn't hit him, despite reason dictating that obviously he did hit him because Crooks stopped firing after the local cops shot.
Right. So he was taken to Pittsburgh, right? The city is about, how far is it from Pittsburgh? Butler's about 40 minutes from Pittsburgh, is that right?
Yep, and the body was left on the rooftop till 6 a.m. and then taken to Pittsburgh and the excuse was that we've got more advanced facilities in Pittsburgh than we do in Butler County. However, then they do just a run-of-the-mill autopsy, incomplete toxicology, and release the body prematurely for cremation.
Right, and this Ariel Goldschmidt is a dual citizen too, right?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, and so not necessarily suggesting that like Israel did this, but they did handle all the evidence, and including the guy who autopsied Crooks is a dual citizen who was not only that, he was in Israel after October 7th, helping the IDF identify the bodies of the Hamas attack. He was working with another guy, an Israeli official who's the source of a lot of these rumors about beheaded babies and stuff like that. And then this Goldschmidt character, 9 months later, he's the one doing the Crooks autopsy. And I think the reason his background is worth mentioning is just because he did, in my opinion, such a shoddy job where releasing the body with fragments still inside it. And then this toxicology report I obtained shows that he collected certain specimens from Crooks, like his hair, blood, eye bile, and didn't list the results for those specimens, which raises questions about, what kind of drugs Crooks might have been on.
Wow, yeah. So this is such an important event that would happen. This will go into a long line of like suspicious actions by medical examiners that I've studied, even in Pittsburgh too. Like some of these smiley face killer deaths are very
Really?
strange. Yeah.
Interesting.
And Cyril Wecht too. I think he was in that Allegheny County, the great Cyril Wecht who I interviewed. There's just a lot of suspicious stuff. Like the evidence goes out. Like what else? Like what else about Crooks was odd? Like didn't they go to his house and doesn't his dad have like a psychology background or something like that?
Yeah, his mother and father were both licensed professional counselors. And this is so I looked into this. I couldn't figure out what exactly they did, though. They worked for some nondescript like Allegheny County Community Care. I don't know if they were paper pushers or if they were actually treating patients, which is weird that I couldn't, like, there's no public reporting on that, despite them being the parents of an almost history changing assassin, or he did change history regardless of whether he was successful. It really, and there's also the fact that the dad told the police after the shooting that, oh, well, Thomas was having a mental breakdown. He was really declining the last month of his life. And it's like, okay, well, you gave him the rifle, though. Why did you give him the rifle if you think he's having a mental breakdown? Like, you're not only his father, you're a professional mental health care counselor. It really makes no sense. And we haven't heard hardly anything from the parents since like August 2024. Like they're filmed walking to the supermarket and that's pretty much it. They have not made any public comments.
It is just so strange, that one. It just doesn't make any sense. One of the odd things too that happened, if I remember correctly, is that Jill Biden and Harris were both in Pennsylvania on that date too, right? Weren't they campaigning in Pennsylvania? Do you know?
I don't know
You
about
know?
Harris,
Oh,
but I
okay.
know Jill Biden had an event at, I think it was being held inside of a casino in Pittsburgh, and yet she was allocated a lot of more resources than Trump, including a counter surveillance team, which are like plainclothes guys that would be roaming around on the outer perimeter. Like these are the exact type of guys who presumably would have been able to locate crooks right off the bat. Instead, they're at an indoor event, which is inherently a lot more secure and a lot more easily securable. The excuse given at the time was, well, Jill Biden's actually part of the government and Trump's a former president, so she gets more resources. But then we find out later that Trump actually had counter surveillance division agents at previous events in 2024, but was denied them for that event. So the excuse didn't really hold water.
And I remember there was some dispute that a lot of his Secret Service people were not the highest performing. Do you ever recall anything about that or aware of it?
Yeah, and it's just even a lot of them weren't actually agents. There were at least 15 people there who were Homeland Security Investigations agents, which is a division of the DHS that investigates like customs violations and human trafficking. But they're like looking at data and records. They're not on the ground. They have no background in security. And a lot of these guys were the boots on the ground at Butler that day.
Wow. I mean, it's just really something else that even happened. It's not like if you look at that AGR building you're talking about, there was this whole deception about it was too sloped. It's really like on a 12-degree roof. It's not that tall. There are other places you could probably see it from. People saw him from the ground because I remember a video about that. Somebody mentioned it in the chat. So it's
Yeah, I saw that chat go by and they say that a lady is yelling, "Crooks, get down from there." Actually, the lady's yelling, "Ross, get down," because it was like her husband or something. There's this guy named Ross who's just, the footage shows crooks crawling into place. Everybody sees that he has a rifle, and 90% of the people are getting down or hiding behind trees. And there's this guy, Ross, just standing there, like almost spellbound, like just staring at crooks. And the lady's like, "Ross, get down. What are you doing?" So it sounds a little bit like crooks, but it's actually Ross.
gotcha. Yeah, so that's just one. And then 2 months later, you have another very murky, suspicious character in Ryan Ruth shows up in Miami, and he's kind of like an international man of mystery. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, international man of mystery. I assume you mean that as like a euphemism, because we actually know a lot more about him than we do crooks, which I think goes, your little catchphrase for him, the man of mystery, in the sense that he was over in Ukraine doing pretty much like intelligence/military work, helping recruit foreign fighters from Syria and Afghanistan to go against Russia. And this got him flagged to at least 7 either federal or international law enforcement agencies, where other volunteers are like, well, this Ryan Ruth guy, he seems dangerous, possibly unhinged. He's possibly doing illegal activities. He gets reported to the FBI, CIA, Customs, Interpol, DHS. The State Department even had an investigation open into him for violating arms trafficking regulations at the time of the assassination attempt. So it raises serious questions of how he was able to operate with an impunity and almost get a shot off at Trump when he's a multiple-time felon who's on the radar of so many agencies. It's really strains credulity.
But he was traveling around. That's why I called him that kind of label. Is that I think he was in Hawaii,
Yeah.
Georgia, Ukraine. He was in this video, I guess, with Crooks from BlackRock. Is that really true?
Oh, Crooks was in the BlackRock video, which I think a lot of people are reading a little bit too much into that. It's like BlackRock did a commercial for managing teachers' pensions, and they film at Bethel Park High School, and it's like, oh, look, there's Crooks. Again, this is years before the shooting. It is a weird coincidence, but I think it's a coincidence. It was Ruth. I think it's more interesting that Ruth was in a commercial for the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, which of course is the CIA-backed neo-Nazi militia. I don't think it's a militia anymore. I think it's part of the normal military. But that to me is far more interesting, and that shows you just how close he was to these CIA sponsored ops, that it's him and some other people are doing a protest urging Ukraine and the U.S. to rescue those Azov fighters who were in the early stage of the Ukraine war. They were kind of stranded in a power plant in one of the eastern provinces, and Ruth was part of the protest urging action on this. And apparently, according to his own self-published book, he was arrested and immediately let out of jail where everybody else had to serve sentences, but he was immediately sprung, which is just another bizarre fact about this guy.
And then he already had a self-published book, and you've read through that. Can you talk about what he wrote about or what he did?
Yeah, I think it's called Ukraine's Unwinnable War. It's still on Amazon for anybody who, I don't know why you would. It's really not an easy book to get through. It's like 300 pages. Most of it is his philosophical ramblings about democracy and geopolitics, but there are some key details about himself in this book where he talks about, like going to Poland, trying to cross the border, initially volunteering to be a fighter, but he's a 58-year-old guy with no combat experience, so they turn him down, and that's when he transitions to volunteering to recruit or help or working to recruit volunteers. And one of the most interesting nuggets in this book is that he says his, quote, best partner in this effort to recruit volunteers is an Israeli guy. So there's like another Israeli connection to both of these cases. I was never able to track down who his Israeli partner was, despite interviewing a whole bunch of people who knew him over there. Nobody knew who this Israeli guy was, but that's, one of the key outstanding questions that I think we need answers to.
My understanding is he was involved in a lot of like low-level crimes, like not paying bills. Like I think I remember from one of your interviews, but he also seemed to have money to travel around these international flights, which aren't cheap, right? Like he's moving from Hawaii to other sides of the country.
Yep. Yeah. He winds up, he's a construction worker, and he gets a multiple time felon. His first charge is in like 2002. He had a series of misdemeanors, but first major case is where he's in a dispute with his construction workers. These guys seem to be like illegal migrants from Mexico. He hasn't been paying with them. They get into a fight. He threatens these guys with a 410 shotgun. He tries to run over one of them. They call the cops. The cops show up and find that he's possessing dynamite illegally. He goes to jail. He calls somebody from jail with a cell phone and tries to tell him to hide the dynamite. A prison snitch tells the police. The police find more dynamite at his other sites. He gets out on bail. While he's out on bail, he gets in a confrontation with the police where they pull him over. He's got like a Tommy gun on his passenger seat. He runs away, boards himself inside of his house, has a standoff. After all this, he only gets probation. A couple years pass. He gets another serious felony where he's caught paying crackheads to steal construction equipment. They find like over $30,000 worth of stolen equipment on his premises. Still just gets more probation. And then in the 2010s, we don't know how or why, but he becomes politically radicalized and he eventually finds himself in Ukraine. But yeah, all this raises the question, who is funding him and how? Like it costs a lot of money to defend yourself from these charges, and then to go to Ukraine with no apparent income streams. I guess he had a fiance named Kathleen Schaefer in Hawaii who was funding some of his trips, but that's an awfully generous fiance. And I guess the last thing I'll say about it is during the trial, he was tried late last year and early this year. And the prosecution revealed that I guess his daughter got like $150,000 deposit in her account, but we have no information about where that money came from. And because Ruth was defending himself and he's like halfway in the bag already, he never asked good cross-examination questions, and he never actually got to the bottom of like, well, where did that money come from? The prosecution never even disclosed it either.
And he's like then promoting this far right Nazi, literal Nazi organization in Eastern Ukraine, which is really, this is like not a band with like a good reputation. They were training guys who were literal Nazis from the base and people associated with O9A. They would go there to get training. That was kind of their inside role. So it's very strange that he's there holding a flag for these people that even Putin's complaining about, like literal Nazis. He's always saying literal Nazis. These are literal Nazis.
Yeah. It's pretty ironic that the DHS actually put out a warning in February, March 2022. It was kind of like an internal memo that was leaked warning about U.S. neo-Nazis traveling to Ukraine to join the battle. And the DHS was worried that these Nazis would go overseas, get training, fight with the Azov battalion, and then come home and pose domestic terrorism threats. And that's not exactly what happened with Ryan Ruth. Like, he wasn't a Nazi. He was like a turbo liberal, but the warning was directionally accurate. Like, he did go over there, was presumably radicalized, and did come back and, tried to do terrorism. So the DHS memo was kind of prescient.
Yeah, no, it's really weird. And this stuff is still around. The O9A and Adam Waffen, these two misguided guys went and shot up a mosque in San Diego, and one of them is wearing the Adam Waffen label, the insignia, and so this like nuclear power thing. So it's still around. Like, this is within the last month. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. So Ruth is very odd. Like, he's Indian, going from Hawaii to like where he literally was like 5 miles away from where Mark David Chapman worked at a hospital. Like, literally same kind of thing. Chapman, where did he get his plane flight amounts to go all the way to New York and back and fly all the time? These are mysteries. These are really strange. But even what's mysterious is that these guys both had an opportunity to take a shot at Trump, because Ruth is a even stranger. Like, how does he get into this spot in Miami or Palm Beach to even shoot at Trump, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's the biggest smoking gun of the crime itself that day, is that Trump's golfing on the 5th hole. Secret Service agent sees Ruth on the 6th hole, fires 5 times, misses all 5 times. Ruth runs away. He's caught about 45 minutes later in another county. But it turned out that Ruth had been camping there since about 2 a.m. for about 11 hours. And if you look at the House Task Force final report, it talks about how Trump's golf plans were last minute. And in fact, the Secret Service was informed about his golf plans at about 2 a.m. that day, that Trump wanted to go golfing later. And so the Secret Service gets the information about Trump wanting to go golf. And then Ryan Ruth shows up at the golf course right around that same time, which to me raises the question about whether there was some sort of leak. Not only the timing, but the fact, like, how did Ruth know that was the spot to hide in the first place? I guess it's a well-known spot for paparazzi photographers to take photos of Trump while he's golfing. That's like probably well-known within the industry in Palm Beach, but that's not something that Ryan Ruth, a guy from Hawaii or from North Carolina who was living in Hawaii, how did he find out that was like the perfect and ideal spot to get a line of sight on Trump from?
And be there for that amount of time, right? So he's
Yeah.
not seen for 10 hours or something. Like, I mean, and he's there with like a GoPro, so he's there to film it, and potentially with like, what is it? Like, you have the picture of it in your book. You have the plates, whatever, to like if somebody takes a shot at him, right? Like, it is. And even, I mean, you talk about the tragedy of him, like his leaving that site. Like, the actual Secret Service member responded forcefully, right, to when they witnessed, once they figured out it was Ruth with a rifle, right?
Forcefully, but not accurately. The Secret Service agent, he ended up testifying at Ruth's trial, and he says At first I thought it was a homeless guy, and I said, how are you, sir? But then he sees Ruth pointing a rifle at him, and then the Secret Service agent opens up fire, shooting 5 times and missing all 5 times. And because he missed, Ruth gets away. And if it's not for a witness who heard the shots and saw him fleeing in an Xterra and took down the license plate, who knows if he would have gotten away. I mean, he had an escape plan to Mexico. He knew some guy down there that's a whole nother angle. He was texting with a Mexican trying to smuggle in illegal immigrants throughout early 2024, which was another Biden administration initiative at the time. But yeah, the Secret Service didn't actually catch him that day either.
And then there was that tragedy, like there was a standoff. He acted kind of blasé to me, and then there was like an accident that involved like the permanent injuring of a young girl. So like he imposed this on these people like that had long-term life-altering effects, right?
Yeah, and when Ruth went to trial earlier this year, he kind of acted like a clown, and I saw a lot of people online be like, "Oh, this guy's kind of hilarious." Like he filed a motion where he challenged Trump to trial by combat, saying like if let's settle this like men. He challenged Trump to a golf match where he's like, if you win, you can publicly execute me. If I win, I get to become president. At one point, he tried to call an ex-girlfriend as a witness to testify that Ruth refused to spank her in bed, which I guess he was arguing would prove that he was a nonviolent person. And so a lot of people saw this and it's like, oh, this guy's hilarious. He's kind of funny. But you got to keep in mind that this wasn't just an assassination attempt. When he was pulled over on the 95, it backed up traffic and a lady crashed into the backup traffic. And this little adorable 3-year-old girl gets permanent brain damage, and her life is going to be ruined forever as a result of Ruth's actions. So really, I have little to no sympathy for the guy. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, probably in a supermax, which might be deserved considering what happened to this girl.
Right. It is just so wild. There's other things. You mentioned these other people in the book who had handlers. This Gendron, who was another, I think, right-wing influenced shooter, and a guy maybe not as many people know, but Nikita Kasap, who thought he was being groomed to be another assassin of Donald Trump. Can you talk about those two guys?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter in the book called Assassination Graham, which is kind of a play off of like the Terrorgram moniker that's been given to this, network of chat rooms on Telegram and other Discord and other platforms of troubled young men who are like almost fanboys of terrorists and mass shooters. And the Kassup case specifically, I lead the chapter with it because it was reportedly a Trump assassination plot where 2 Ukrainians convinced him to kill his parents and steal like $15,000 and other guns and gold coins and other equipment from their house in this half-baked Trump assassination plot. These Ukrainians convinced him to do this, and they said, hey, we're going to give you coordinates for a safe house in Eureka, California. Kill your parents, take the equipment, meet us at this safe house in California, and we'll give you drones and other assets so you could fulfill the mission. We'll blame it on Russia, and it'll start this new giant war and help collapse society, because this was like an 09A type chat room where the goal is to do stuff to accelerate the collapse of society. So it turns out that I guess the coordinates were to a location of like a military base. These Ukrainian guys got him to send cryptocurrency to them. I guess the government story is that they were just scamming this kid, and they got him to do heinous acts. Just as a scam, it wasn't like a legitimate assassination plot, but it gives you an idea of the type of kid who might be susceptible to this type of manipulation. And I raised the question, well, was Crooks this type of kid too? And as you mentioned, I go into a series of other shootings that are very similar, where it's a young guy, 20, 22, in these chat rooms with federal provocateurs or foreign state actors or other criminals who convince them to do heinous things. It seems to be a pattern.
It sure does. And he was told, Nita Kassab told he was one of 10 people. The other 9 people were never seen, but he thought he was working with like a organized group. So it was relatively sophisticated operation against him, in my opinion, but led to a very dark end. I think he was caught somewhere in the Midwest in some small town. But,
yeah, in Kansas.
Kansas, yeah. There's just so many things about these assassination. One of the interesting things is Trump seems not, we were talking in the pre-show, he shut down the investigation into Butler, right? But he also seems to not really have a grasp on some of the actual factual details of what happened back on July 13th, 2024. Is that true? Is that true?
Totally. Yeah. He, in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I guess it's been maybe a month or two now, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner attack, he does a press conference afterwards and he starts going off in a tangent about Butler. And he says, well, at least my security at this Correspondents' Dinner did a better job than they did at Butler. Although my sniper at Butler, his name is David, he saved my life. He responded from 400 yards away in 4.2 seconds. And neither one of those things are true. In fact, the sniper responded like we discussed. It was 15 seconds, and he was in at a barn right behind Trump from about 170, 200 yards away. And I don't know why Trump has those facts wrong. It seems like he's being given misinformation about the attempts on his own life, but it is troubling. And that's not the only instance. There's like something more minor. The witness who saw Ryan Ruth running away from the golf course, Trump initially said this was a woman. Like only a woman would be nosy enough to take down the license plates and, help catch the guy. But I love this woman. Thankfully, it was actually a guy. The guy testified at Ruth's trial. And I'm like, oh, it's not as important of an example, but it just shows you that he doesn't know the details about the attempts in his own life, which is troubling since this is like the guy with his with the nuclear football and everything.
Right. It's really serious, especially if people are telling him there's Iranians. There was another story about Marchant that they promoted, but there's this environment of like the Iranians are behind it, and there's something like that, and it seems to have had an effect on Trump. Can you expand on that?
And Trump even said this when the war started this year in February. He says, well, I got the Ayatollah before the Ayatollah got me. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said something similar. He said, well, Trump had the last laugh, and they're referring to Iran supposedly tried to kill Trump in 2024. And now this is kind of our revenge. If you look at this, though, there's just absolutely no evidence that Iran ever posed a legitimate assassination attempt to Trump.
It's just that there were all these people. Waltz was saying it. He got in trouble. Waltz was on like a encrypted chat with somebody. He got in trouble, but like he's trying to get into Trump's brain. So like these influence ops on Trump are happening constantly. I don't know if they've ever not happened.
Yeah, first of all, there are people who were suggesting that the Iranians were linked to Butler. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu was asked about this in June of 2025. A Fox News reporter says, Benjamin, he mentions that Iran tried to kill Trump. The reporter's like, oh, this is true. You have evidence of this? And clearly the reporter was referring to Butler and Palm Beach. And Netanyahu says, yes, they did it twice. And they tried to kill me too. And that was really insincere, shocking that he'd be insincere about it. But then there's these other cases. You mentioned Marchant, who was a Pakistani guy arrested July 12th, the day before Trump was shot in Butler. And when this case was announced in August of 2024, everybody immediately assumed that it had to have been linked with what happened in Butler, which isn't a reasonable leap to take. If a supposed would-be assassin, is arrested the day before Trump is shot, that's a hell of a coincidence. But if you look at that case, it's pretty much just a typical case where it's a low IQ guy. He did seem to have intentions to do something in the U.S. criminal, possibly assassinate politicians or something else. But the U.S. was monitoring him overseas. They let him into the country on purpose in April 2024, and then they ran an informant at him. The informant was an Afghan who had served with the U.S. military in Afghanistan. The informant's driving him around, introduces him to two undercover FBI agents who are posing as hitmen. They take him to a strip club. They supposedly have a vague beginnings of a plot, but the defendant tells them, well, meet me in Pakistan in September 2024. We'll give you the actual plan. And it's when he was leaving the country in July 12th, 2024, that he was arrested, held in solitary confinement for about 18 months, and then convicted actually the week that the war started.
One thing's consistent about these stories is that there's a handler, somebody surrounding these guys. Almost all of there isn't one that isn't, like there isn't some kind of strange connection or something. And there's weird things about Crook that reminded me of Sirhan constantly going to the range all the time. And I think you mentioned in one of your interviews he's showing up at the range with somebody else who shows up at the same time. This is all Sirhan stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there were four times that I saw in the records where somebody signed in at the exact same time and went to the same ranges, and that name in the records is redacted. Most interestingly was late November 2023, Crooks actually emailed his community college and said, hey, I'm going to be late to class today. He doesn't give a reason why, but he went to the range that day instead of going to class, and with somebody else. And it makes one wonder, you could go to the range at any time. If it would have been him just going with his dad, they could have gone at any time. What was so important that he had to miss class? Like, this is a model student, and why is he going to the range with some mystery person that day? It's very bizarre.
Who we don't know. Like, we don't know who. Like, this is a major event.
The FBI knows.
Well, that's another good important. I mean, I think you said Kasha Patel in there was nothing more to disclose, much like the Epstein files, I think.
And this is kind of blown up on Twitter the last 2 weeks, where Tucker Carlson said that Trump himself shut down the investigation. Dan Bongino, the former deputy director, claps back and says, oh, Tucker's a liar. Trump's satisfied with the investigation. We told him that Crooks acted alone, and he accepts it. So it's not that Trump shut it down. It's that we exhausted our investigation, and that's that. But I went back and looked at the timeline, and actually Dan Bongino took office March 17th, 2025. And then it's like the very next week, Trump says he's briefed on it, and he was told that Crooks acted alone. And then Bongino goes on a media tour, and by May 2025, within 2 months of him taking office, he's telling everybody Crooks acted alone, the infamous "there's no there" quote. And he couldn't have investigated it himself if he takes office and it's turned around within mere weeks. He's making these assertions, and it makes one wonder, why are they relying on the previous FBI for their conclusions?
Right. Great question. This book is so great, guys. You got to get this book. It's so important, this history, because it ties into the Iran war. This is everything leading up to, what is it, February 20th, 2026 is this narrative thing that's going through, and there's people surrounding Trump. Oh, yeah, Iran. Well, I think you even mentioned Wiles, Netanyahu, Waltz. These other characters are telling Trump something. And who knows what's going on that we don't even know about, but it seems this agenda really to turn Trump to really like an intel influence operation and tying these things into these events into it.
Yeah, they're not even telling him this information. They actually put him on Steve Witkoff's plane the last 2 months of his campaign. They say, oh, the Iranians smuggled missiles into the country. They want to shoot your plane down. So we're going to have you fly with Susie Wiles and Witkoff on Witkoff's jet and use Trump Force One as a decoy. So that's like a real psyop. That's not them just saying, sir, there's this vague threat out there. That's them saying, you need to use somebody else's plane because they might shoot down your plane. I called it a psyop on Tucker's show, and I stand by that.
Wow, it's absolutely incredible. Great book, guys. Check out the book. Do you have time for a few questions, Ken?
Sure.
Okay, let's see. The chat's really talking a lot. Let's see. Bart says Candace Owens discovered that one of the bystanders killed by crooks had an odd history. He was invited to sit near Trump before the speech. I think that's comparatory. There's been something bandied about on my social media that some mystery person walked up to Corey Comparatori and said, "Can you step forward and move forward in the stands?" Have you heard anything about anything like that?
Yeah, that was actually reported, in the weeks after the shooting. That Corey Comparatori was invited to sit in the bleacher section. I don't know if there's any significance to this. I mean, Jim Copenhaver, who wrote the foreword to my book, he was invited too. I think they were just selecting people to come sit in the bleachers instead of just being in the common area. The notion that Corey had some sort of knowledge and that's why they killed him. I don't think Corey was the target. I think it was just he was just a casualty. If they're going to kill Corey, they could have done it a lot more easily. Just, at it on the streets or something like that, instead of like this high profile, multi-layered conspiracy.
And I've seen the videos. They're very graphic. There was a lot of blood and it was very dark, like the shot that hurt him. Uncle Ted asks, is Crooks trans? I've seen this bandied about a little bit. Can you address that?
No, he wasn't. He was cisgendered, I guess, to use the commie terminology. There was, when Tucker released that social media data, he had some account on like DeviantArt that was set to they, them. And everybody's like, oh, maybe he was into this trans stuff. But they, them is actually the default setting when you create a DeviantArt account. So he would have had to switch it and take proactive steps to clarify his sex.
Gotcha. Have you ever heard that he was like, there was a body double, Matthew Urich? Have you ever heard this story?
The Maxwell Urich theory is something, it's in my book. It's still an outstanding question. And I think there's something weird going on there. It's after, it's like the next day, Roger Stone tweets out that, or no, not the next day. It was the day of the shooting. Roger Stone tweets out that, oh, the shooter, his name is Maxwell Urich, who is this guy who looks almost like an older version of Crooks. And he is a Pittsburgh resident. He was arrested in 2016 for harassing Trump supporters at a rally. He's obviously a left-wing guy. He seems like an Antifa type figure. And then he's immediately reported as the shooter. And then people walk it back like, oh, it really wasn't him. But Roger Stone stands by his initial reports. He says he was given this information by state law enforcement. And the thing is, we haven't heard from this Urich guy since the shooting. You think if people were accusing you of being the actual would-be assassin, you would go on social media or something like that and say, no, it wasn't me. I'm going to sue some people if you don't take my name out of your mouth. So I do think Crooks was the shooter, but it is very weird, these initial reports. At the very least, it shows you that there was some sort of sophisticated disinformation op going around. Let me address the specific comment. Earlobes have gauge scars, which Crooks does not have. Yeah, so there is a photo of Crooks, or the shooter, dead on the roof. And the thing is that Crooks has a very unique ear. Like he's got bumps on the outer helix, which show up in the picture, which would tell you that it really was Crooks, like the ear matches Crooks's ear. But a researcher named Jason Goodman, he thinks that the ear might have been photoshopped, at least that top part that show the bumps. And he contends that there's some creases on the ear that indicate that the ear used to have ear gauges, which is what Maxwell Urich had. I'm still unconvinced. The thing is, if Urich was the shooter, why wouldn't they just blame Urich? That's my whole thing. It's like, we have no reports that Urich was an undercover informant or anything like that. If it was him on that rooftop, they just would have blamed him and it would have fit the narrative perfectly. Like, this left-wing guy tries to kill Trump. I just don't, the Urich theory doesn't really make sense to me.
Gotcha. Why wouldn't Uncle Ted? Why wouldn't they give Crooks a rifle to use? Iron sights for a kill shot. That's a good point. 150 yards isn't that far as like sniping is concerned. That's what other people have said. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, he had a red dot optical, not iron sights. It wasn't a magnifying. He didn't have a scope, so it was a tough shot. But by all accounts, he was a really good shot. I mean, at one point he goes to the range. This wasn't the Clareton Sports Club. He took a class at something called like the Keystone Pistol Range, and somebody who trained with him gave an interview and said that Crooks once shot a target so many times with his 9mm that he blew out a hole in the target. So he was a pretty serious marksman. But the thing is that he was being chased by the local cops during his attempt. Like, one local cop tried to climb up on the roof. Crooks sees the local cop, points his rifle at him, and then swivels back to take the shot at Trump. So it's really high adrenaline situation, not an easy shot at all. And despite that, he still came within millimeters of hitting his target. And if Trump didn't move, or if he would have aimed for Trump's body, he probably would have gotten a flush hit.
And didn't Crooks have like multiple cell phones, like more than one cell phone or burner phones on his body? Wasn't that reported?
On his, he had multiple devices on his body. He had one cell phone and then what looked like almost like a garage door opener, which I guess we haven't even talked about the bombs. The device, the garage door opener, was linked to the bombs later found in the trunk of his Hyundai Elantra, which weren't set to detonate, but it's worth mentioning for several reasons, including the fact that, like, where did he learn to build these bombs? Yeah, that's pretty much it. But it's just another unusual fact.
Yeah, interesting. Telegraphic asks, are there any evidence of drones in the Trump plots?
Crooks himself flew a drone, and then the Secret Service's drone detection equipment was broken all day and came online about 10 minutes after Crooks flew his drone, which is, I guess, an unfortunate coincidence, if you want to call it that. Yeah, again, Jason Goodman is the guy to ask about the drones. He contends that there's footage showing these things speeding past the camera, that they couldn't have been bugs. They had to have been these high-tech drones. Yeah, I don't know about that. I would defer to Jason. The most interesting thing that I found in the congressional transcripts is that the staffers themselves were asking the agents about drones. They were showing the agents photos and saying, look at that in the background. Does that look like a drone to you? And the agents all said, yeah, that does look like a drone. And there's a lot of redactions and the series of questions are incomplete. So I don't know exactly what the staffers were trying to get at, but the congressional record does show that drones were asked about.
Interesting. Blues Johnson Traveler asks, who's responsible for the poor security around Trump?
Ultimately, the buck stops at Trump right now. I mean, the guy in charge of his detail at Butler has since been promoted to be the Secret Service director, which is just inexcusable. Even if this is just incompetence and not something more nefarious, at the very least, the guy shouldn't have been promoted to direct the entire agency, where he's now blocking the DHS Inspector General from probing malfeasance at Butler. Yeah, you can make all the excuses for Trump that you want, but he's promoted the guy that was responsible for him almost dying.
Wow, just something doesn't add up.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
It's just like what you talked about with Tucker Carlson is like, it's hard to like make it make sense. It's like, wow, something else. You've done some work on OKC. Did somebody ask where's the OKC question? If you don't mind, it's a little bit off topic, but somebody asked about Promise Software. That was it. Uncle Ted. Ken, do you find it odd that the Murrah building was where all the CIA Promise servers were stored? Do you have any comment about that?
Uh, if this might be a viewer of Jose Gallison's show, and I think he's talked about this before. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd have to see more evidence of that. I am not aware of the Promise Software angle. I view OKC more through the lens of PatCon and failed sting operation on neo-Nazis. For the Promise angle, if it's true, is a bizarre coincidence. But with the PatCon angle, we've got actual names and faces of people who were involved. We've got informants who had infiltrated the neo-Nazi movement that were forewarning the federal government that an attack was coming. Like that's totally fleshed out. So I need something a little more than just a bizarre coincidence to put meat on the bone of the Promise angle, that theory.
There is some kind of strange similarity between OKC, where they're blaming the far right or neo-Nazis because they're surrounding a lot of these assassins. There's something there where like, oh, we can just blame it on 09A. It kind of gives credence to the whole notion that people ask me all the time, is 09A intel? And it's like, well, maybe, because these are like intel operations. We are at the hour mark, and thanks, Chad. We had 150 live listeners. Thanks for all the great comments and everything, everybody. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ken, or anything I missed before we wrap it up?
No, that hour really sped by quickly. It was a really fun chat, and just thank you again for actually taking the time to read the book. It really means a lot, like I said.
Well, there's a lot more in here, guys. There's a lot of things in this book, so you can go check it out. It's available now. I know you can get it on Amazon. Looking at the Amazon page, you can get a Kindle, you can get a paperback. One of the interesting things about the book is you had it published by the Libertarian Institute. Can you kind of talk about that, maybe what that was like and why you chose to publish through them?
Sure. So Scott Horton, longtime fan of him. He's the founder of the Libertarian Institute, and I met him in 2019. He was giving a talk in DC about the Afghanistan papers that had been recently published by the Washington Post, the implications for that. I go to his talk, and afterwards I approach him. I'm a veteran reporter of over almost 10 years at the time, and I give him my card, ask him for freelance opportunities, and he was gracious enough to give me the time of the day. Like, he doesn't know who I am. I'm sure he gets proposition like that all the time. I write a couple freelance articles for him in like 2020, 2021. Nothing really remarkable, but he was gracious enough to publish my work. And then it's when I started investigating the Oklahoma City bombing that we really became friends. He had me on his podcast a couple times. We've been in communication in regards to that case for years now. And when I told him I was working on a book, he jumped right at it. He knew my quality of work from the OKC stuff. And yeah, it was pretty cool that, you meet one of your heroes in this space, and 7 years later, he's publishing your book. So because he was nice enough to not just tell me to screw off at the time, I hope he's happy with the product of that too.
He should be. It's a great book. You guys did a great job, and it's clean. It has a great, fit and finish to any book. So it's professionally done, unlike my books. But I should probably reach out to him. Horton has done incredible work, like 6,000 interviews. I think he's affiliated with the antiwar.com too. I don't know, but amazing guy.
He's a powerhouse.
Yeah. Incredible body of work. There's no other doubt about it. But congrats on the book. Congrats on all the great shows you've done. I would check those out too, guys. If you haven't heard Ken Silva on Tucker Carlson or Mario Nawful, I would check those out and listen to those. They're a little different than my kind of angle. I kind of just talked about some of the stuff I know, but you can get the book now. Do you have a website for this? Or I know you publish on what is it? What is it?
Headline
Headline
USA.
USA.
Yeah.
Sorry. Brains
Yeah, that's
power.
my full-time job. I run a news site called Headline USA, which has been, conservative news site for about 10 years now. They hired me a few years ago to do original investigative stuff to try to grow the site because we've been it really blew up. The site became one of the biggest conservative sites in late 2010s. One of the few sites willing to do pro-Trump coverage, got really popular with a lot of the conservative boomers. Then, Biden gets in charge. We got to deal with all the censorship, demonetization, deplatforming. So we've been a little bit stagnant, but this book has helped get more attention onto that. So yeah, if people just want to read about the news from a conservative/libertarian angle, go to that site, Headline USA.
Yeah, Headline USA. And you just don't write on this subject alone. Like, you came to my attention writing for far right and stuff like that and things like, so you cover a wide variety of different topics as well. So check that out, Headline USA.
Yeah.
Is that the best place to contact you, or social media? I know you're active on X, Twitter.
Yeah, my Twitter is at JD_cashless. If people want to find me there.
Yeah, you can follow up with him there on X or Headline USA. Follow his other work. But today we talked about his excellent book, just published May 2026 by the Libertarian Institute. And the full title is The Trump Assassination Plots, What the Investigations Missed and Why It Matters. It's a great book. Check it out. Buy it. And again, the author is Ken Silva, Silva. Thanks so much for your time.
The pleasure was all mine. Thanks again.
Yeah, stay there.